Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This time out, a new portable, compact, networkable audio interface from MOTU. Let's get started. This is the new MOTU UltraLite AVB audio interface. It can connect to your computer by USB or using the AVB networking protocol. It has microphone preamps, line inputs, line outputs, headphone outputs, very sophisticated built-in mixing capabilities for latency-free tracking, and it also has built-in DSP for latency-free effects while you're tracking. The UltraLite AVB is very easy to navigate despite the sophistication of its capabilities because you can take charge of everything that it does using a web-based app. So let's take a quick tour of the hardware unit and then we'll look at the web control app. The UltraLite AVB has two XLR microphone inputs. The first of those is on the front panel, and it's controlled with a mic gain control, pad switch, and 48-volt phantom power switch here on the front panel. The second XLR input is on the back panel, and it also has its control right here on the front panel. We've got a level control, pad control, and 48-volt phantom power for that as well. Now we also have two front panel guitar inputs, and each of those has its own trim control. We have a headphone output with a control that toggles between controlling the main monitor output volume level and the headphone level. The front panel level and trim controls serve double duty for accessing the various functions in the UltraLite AVB. For example, guitar input 1's trim control also serves as our power switch. Guitar input 2's trim control switches us between input and output metering. The two microphone gain controls allow us to navigate among the screens that are on the front panel of the UltraLite AVB. For example, if we push the select button, we can scroll between those using gain 2, and then we can go back to our original screen by pushing gain 1 for microphone 1. The right side of the front panel has an LCD screen where we have all of our metering, as well as an indication for sample rate, where our clock is coming from, activity on the optical input and output, and activity on the MIDI input and output. The UltraLite AVB has a lot of inputs and outputs, and all of those are collected onto the back panel, except for microphone 1, which is on the front panel as I mentioned earlier. Beginning on the upper left, we have MIDI input and output, and below that is our optical input and output. We can switch that between 2-channel Toslink and 8-channel ADAT format. Next up, we have a USB 2 port for connecting to the computer, and we have an AVB Ethernet port, which is used to network this to other interfaces as well as to a computer network. The back panel has 6 balanced 1/4-inch outputs, as well as 2 main outs that are normally used to feed to your monitors. There are 6 balanced audio inputs, as well as the second microphone input on XLR. One of the great things about the UltraLite AVB is that all those inputs and outputs are completely independent, so you can use both guitar inputs, both microphone inputs, and all 6 of the analog inputs simultaneously, along with the optical inputs. This gives us a ton of simultaneous connectivity and also allows the UltraLite AVB to serve as the hub for a very sophisticated studio. One other very important feature of the UltraLite AVB is that MOTU has completely redesigned the audio paths inside these units. The converters are of top quality, the analog circuitry is of top quality, the microphone inputs sound great. It really is a pristine, detailed, highly dynamic audio interface. To really get an idea of all the power that's inside the UltraLite AVB, let's take a look at the web-based app you use to control it. I've got the UltraLite AVB connected to my Mac Pro using USB 2.0. When you open the browser and open the web-based app, it'll automatically discover that the interface is connected and show you some of the settings, as well as give you access to setting up all the parameters. So the first screen we have is the device screen. If we scroll up here to the top, we can see the configuration, the USB mode, and you can set that anywhere from 24 channels at 192 kilohertz up to 64 channels at 44.1 or 48 kilohertz. Below that, we can set the sample rate, again, anywhere from 44.1 up to 192K. Our clock mode, whether internal or via the optical port. Then we have a clock status indicator indicating that we are locked to clock. Below this, we have control over the input settings, and these duplicate some of the settings that are on the front panel. For example, the trim control here duplicates the trim control on the front panel. Same with the 48-volt switch and the pad switch. But here inside the web-based app, we also have a polarity reverse switch. For the guitar inputs, we have a polarity invert switch, as well as a trim control that duplicates the front panel trim control. And we do have trim controls for the 6 analog inputs. We also have output settings for all the analog outputs, headphones, main outs, and the 6 balanced analog outputs. If you're using the UltraLite AVB in an audio network, you can set the number of AVB streams here for both input and for output. The next bank of settings allows us to turn the inputs and outputs off by type. So for example, we could turn both microphone outputs off here, both guitar outputs. Basically, we're disabling those inputs and outputs so they don't show up inside the mixer. Next up, we can set the number of input channels for the onboard mixer. We can determine whether our output is feeding ADAT or Toslink format. We can also set the number of channels that are available for feeding to and from your DAW from the UltraLite AVB. Now pretty much everywhere inside the UltraLite AVB you can create presets for any of the settings, and you can restore the factory presets here, and this is where we download updates. Moving to the next screen, this is where we set up our routing. Now there are a lot of different possibilities here, as you'll see. We can open these up. So here's our 2 microphone inputs, here's our 2 guitar inputs, here's our 6 analog inputs, here's our ADAT inputs, and we can determine where those are feeding. Here's our headphones, here's our main outs, our analog outs, and our ADAT outs. And so we can create a matrix that allows us to see what is feeding where. We can also open up the computer streams so you can see which channels are feeding in and out of the computer. Once you have the routing configured the way that you want it, you can switch over to the mixing page, and this is where you set your levels for determining your latency-free mixes, for adding any effects, for creating aux mixes. Any of those types of things are handled here. Now the nice thing is that the mixer is very configurable, so we can look at the overall settings, DSP usage for example, the aux sends, how they're set up, pre or post fade, soloing auxes, those types of things. We can also turn on a high-pass filter for the analog inputs. We can turn on a gate for each of the analog inputs. We've got an EQ, 4-band parametric EQ, and you can individually turn the bands on and off for each of those channels. We can hide those. We have a compressor available, so we have dynamics processing as well. Then we have our aux sends, which in this case I have 2 aux sends turned on here. One is feeding the aux 1 and 2, and the other is feeding reverb. And then we also have group sends as well, which show up down here at the bottom. We have our standard solo and mute control, level control for the input channel, as well as a pan control for the input channel. We can also determine which inputs show up inside the mixer, so you can scale it down. If you don't need to see everything at once, you can easily show and hide different channels. In this case, I'm showing 4 channels, one of which is microphone input number 1, and then I've got 3 other channels as well that aren't assigned. Now on the output side of things, I'm showing a monitor output, a main mix output, and an aux 1 and 2 output. And I also have my reverb showing here as well. And that's a comfort reverb that you can either feed to the main outs, or you can feed to headphones, or to any of the analog or optical outputs. As far as outputs go, you can similarly show or hide whichever of the outputs you prefer. In this case, I've got a monitor output set up here. I've got a main mix output that's feeding my main out 1 and 2. And I've got an aux 1 and 2 output that I've got configured to send to my headphones. Now there's a comfort reverb that runs right inside the box on DSP. That shows up here, and you can route that however you like. I've got it routed to aux 1 and 2, which feeds it to the headphones. I also have it going to my main outputs, which feeds it to my monitors. Now you can send that wherever you like. You could also record that to a track inside your computer. So let's grab a microphone. I've got a Shure SM57 here. It's hooked into input number 1. See that when I unmute that, you can hear a reverb there. Bring that back just a little bit. And again, that's feeding into my headphone output as well. I have a set of Shure headphones plugged into the headphone output. So it's receiving the same signal that's going to my main outs, as well as my reverb send. So for example, if we were doing a vocal, we'd have that comfort reverb feeding into our headphones as well. Now we also have an aux mixing page, and this allows us to create separate aux mixes. This is useful if you have multiple headphone feeds, or if you're using the UltraLite AVB on stage and want to have separate monitor sends. And that is accessed on the tab over here, aux mixing. And it will open up and show us the different auxes. In this case, I've just got aux 1 and 2 created. And you can see the microphone 1 is feeding in, and here's our aux 1 and 2 output, and again, here's where our comfort reverb shows up. Now, as I mentioned earlier, pretty much everything can be saved as a preset on every one of these screens. If we click here, you can see we can create a new preset, we can manage our presets, you can import, export, rename, copy, delete, save. So you have a lot of flexibility for creating presets, for example, for reverb settings, for aux send settings, for mixer configurations, for channel settings. All sorts of things can be saved as presets and easily recalled inside the web app. So the web-based app does 2 things. First of all, it gives us access to all the parameters inside the UltraLite AVB, including all those DSP functions. It also allows us to create latency-free monitoring so that when we're tracking, we aren't getting any problems with delays. So if we switch over to Digital Performer, you can see that our signal from our microphone is feeding here into audio input number 1. If we switch over to our mixing board, it's coming in over here. There's no latency there at all. So if we're overdubbing, we won't have any problems with delays. We'll be looking much more extensively at the networking capability of the UltraLite AVB in a future video. I have a number of other MOTU audio interfaces here, and we'll be creating a larger system and doing a session using those. So you want to check back and see that. But as far as a straight-ahead audio interface that connects by USB 2.0, the UltraLite AVB delivers outstanding quality, outstanding specs. It has built-in DSP, latency-free monitoring, a very flexible web-based control app. It really is a highly functional, portable, lightweight, and easy-to-use audio interface. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute. I'm Mitch Gallagher.